May God bless your day and fill it with peace and wisdom as you join us for this conversation.
Absolutely.
Because, usually when we think about self-improvement, we picture something like, I don't know, adding a fresh coat of paint to a house.
Right, yeah, like doing a little renovation.
Exactly. You decide to build a new habit, or you try to be a bit more patient in traffic. Maybe you read some self-help books to act like a slightly optimized version of yourself.
Version 2.0.
Yeah, but what if the goal isn't redecoration at all? What if the actual goal is a total ground-up demolition?
Oh, man. That's a scary thought.
Right. But before we tear down those walls, let's look at exactly what we're talking about today. We are taking a deep dive into Book 4 of C.S. Lewis's foundational text, Mere Christianity.
A classic. And, up until this point in the book, Lewis focuses really heavily on theoretical theology.
Yeah, the nature of God, the Trinity, all those big abstract concepts.
Exactly. But our mission for this deep dive is to cross over into the fiercely practical. I mean, what do we actually do with this information?
And we're looking at Lewis's radical blueprint for human transformation. The text makes it incredibly clear the goal here isn't just learning how to be a quote-unquote good person.
No, it's not.
Lewis argues it is about becoming an entirely new kind of creature.
And that distinction, that is the anchor for everything you're about to hear. Lewis presents a framework that isn't about following a strict, exhausting set of moral rules.
Which is how most people view religion, right? Just a list of rules.
Totally. But in fact, he argues that the rule-following approach is doomed to fail. It doesn't work. Instead, the text describes this agonizing yet incredibly beautiful process of losing your natural self.
Losing it completely.
Right. The claim is that only by losing that natural self can you actually discover your true personality.
It's a huge shift.
It is. It's a proposed shift from merely existing as a biological organism to, well, truly coming alive in a spiritual sense.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to understand this radical transformation, we have to start with what might be the most counterintuitive instruction in the entire book. Oh, the pretending part.
Yeah. Lewis says that the first practical step to becoming this new creature is a command to pretend.
Which sounds so weird at first.
It really does. And he uses two really memorable analogies to illustrate this. The first is Beauty and the Beast.
Oh, I love that one.
Right. The girl has to kiss a monster as if he were a human, and that very act of treating him like a human transforms him into a real man.
It creates the reality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the second is a story about a man who wears a beautiful mask for years. He wears it for so long that when he finally takes it off, his actual facial structure has grown to fit the mask.
Wow.
The disguise literally became his reality.
The underlying psychology he is tapping into there is profound. I mean, the text is suggesting that the outside behaviors eventually shape the internal reality.
But I have to push back here because this is where a lot of people check out.
Sure, yeah.
The text tells readers to put on Christ, to pray, and to act like they are divine sons of God. But realistically, we know we are actually full of anxieties, petty grievances, and massive egos. Oh, 100%.
So when I act like I love my neighbor, but I secretly despise them, that creates massive cognitive dissonance. Isn't pretending to be something we clearly aren't just a textbook definition of being a hypocrite?
Yeah.
It feels psychologically damaging to fake an emotion like that.
What's fascinating here is how Lewis completely separates the concept of hypocrisy from what he is actually asking the reader to do.
Oh, really? How so?
He makes a sharp distinction between two completely different types of pretending. Like you were describing bad pretending, which is fundamentally about deception.
Right, faking it to trick someone.
Exactly. That is when you pretend to be someone's friend to their face while actively trying to sabotage their career behind their back. That's hypocrisy.
Yeah, that's just toxic.
Lewis points out there is a beneficial kind of pretending, where the simulation is the very mechanism that leads to reality.
Like practice, almost.
Yes. He uses the example of children playing adult games. Think about kids playing house or pretending to be shopkeepers or soldiers.
Oh, yeah, they do that all the time.
They aren't trying to deceive anyone. They aren't hypocrites. That pretense is actually building the physical coordination, the vocabulary, and the emotional intelligence that will eventually help them grow into real adults.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So in his theological framework, God acts as the ultimate initiator of this pretense.
Exactly. The text posits that God looks at our egocentric, fearful, purely biological selves and says, let's pretend this is my son.
Wow.
The argument is that God treats humans as if they are already perfect. specifically so that the pretense can pull them up into that reality.
By putting on the attitude of Christ, even when the internal emotions are screaming the opposite, the individual creates the space for a genuine change to happen.
An ontological change, yeah.
And Lewis gets highly specific about the nature of that change. He introduces two Greek words to explain the difference between the life we have now and the life we are supposedly transforming into.
Bios and zoe.
Okay.
Yes. In this framework, bios is the biological life that we share with nature. It is sustained by air, water, and food, and it is in a constant state of decay.
It's like a battery that starts draining the moment you were born.
That's a great way to put it. Zoe, on the other hand, is the spiritual life. It is the eternal, uncreated life that Lewis claims exists in God.
So it's not just a better version of bios.
No, completely different. Lewis argues that Christianity isn't about God handing humanity a list of moral behaviors to improve our bios. It is about actively injecting his Zoe into us.
And to visualize that, the text uses this brilliant, almost eerie image of a tin soldier.
Oh, the tin soldier, yeah.
Lewis asks the reader to imagine a little metal toy that suddenly starts pulsing with real blood. It grows skin, its metal joints turn into bone and cartilage, and it becomes a real, living man.
That would be horrifying for the toy.
Right. From the perspective of the tin soldier, that transition from safe, hard metal to vulnerable flesh would probably be terrifying. The part of us that resists this transformation is the part that wants to stay safe, predictable, and made of tin.
And if Lewis is right that this spiritual life, this Zoe, is actively invading the biological life, that collision is going to create immense friction.
Definitely.
The tin soldier has to lose its tinness. That brings us to the core demand of this process, which is absolute, unconditional surrender of the natural self.
And Lewis perfectly captures that friction and our desperate attempts to avoid it with his famous toothache analogy.
It is incredibly relatable.
It really is. He says, imagine you are a kid with a terrible toothache. You go to your mother and you ask her for an aspirin just to stop the immediate pain so you can get some sleep.
Just give me the pill.
Right, but you hesitate to even ask her in the first place because you know that tomorrow morning she is going to take you to the dentist.
And dentists are terrifying.
Exactly. And you know the dentist won't just stop the pain of that one specific tooth. He is going to start poking around at all the other teeth. If you give him an inch, he takes a mile.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the human approach to conventional morality versus the theological demand Lewis presents.
How?
Well, the text suggests that we approach being good like we're paying our taxes. We want to pay our required dues. We hand over a little bit of our time for charity. We give a little bit of money. We check the decent person box.
And then we're done.
Right. And then we hope to keep the rest of our time, our energy, and our natural desires completely to ourselves. We want the aspirin.
We just want God or morality to fix the one glaring flaw that is ruining our lives, but we want the rest of our comfortable flaws left alone.
Yes. We want to fix the anger management issue because it's hurting our career, but we want to keep the pride and the selfish ambition because those feel really good.
But the text argues that Christ's demand is absolute.
It is all or nothing. Lewis writes that Christ basically says, I don't want a fraction of your time or your money or your work. I want you.
The whole thing.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
The theological claim here is that God doesn't want to prune a bad branch here and there. He wants to cut down the entire tree.
He doesn't want to drill the infected tooth and put in a nice silver filling.
No. He intends to pull the whole thing out. He demands the total surrender of the natural ego.
So what does this all mean? Because the text presents a massive, glaring paradox right here.
It does.
Lewis explicitly writes that this Christian way is somehow both the hardest thing imaginable and the easiest. How on earth can giving up your entire self, surrendering every desire, every plan, and every ambition be easier than just trying to be a moderately decent person?
To resolve that paradox, Lewis uses the analogy of the lazy student.
Oh, right.
Imagine two students taking a really complex geometry class. The diligent student takes the time to actually understand the underlying theorem. It is agonizing, incredibly hard work up front.
It takes hours of study.
Yes. But the lazy student just memorizes the final answer to the current problem because it's much easier in the moment.
Just rote memorization.
Right. But 6 months later, when the final exam arrives, the lazy student is sweating for hours, trying to frantically solve a problem that the diligent student can solve in 2 minutes.
Because they actually understand the foundation.
Exactly. Lewis argues that trying to keep our natural selfish ego alive, our pride, our need for status, our greed, while simultaneously trying to act good and humble, is an exhausting, impossible compromise.
You are constantly fighting yourself.
It's like trying to drive a car with the parking brake fully engaged.
Yeah, that's a great way to think of it.
Surrendering the ego entirely is incredibly difficult at first,
Yeah.
like the initial pain of understanding the geometry. But once the new Zoe life takes over, Lewis argues it's profoundly easier than living in a state of constant internal friction.
And that shift from constant maintenance to total overhaul is captured in what might be the most famous visual from the text, the living house analogy.
Oh, this one hits hard.
It really does.
Yeah.
Lewis says we invite God into our lives because our roof is leaking and the drains are backed up. We just want a little moral maintenance.
Fix the plumbing.
Right. But suddenly, he starts knocking down walls, adding wings, and digging out the foundation. It hurts, and from our perspective, it feels completely unnecessary.
Like, what are you doing to my house?
Exactly. Why is he destroying the house? Lewis writes that it's because you thought he was making you into a decent little cottage, but he is actually building a palace, and he intends to come and live in it himself.
It is a complete shift in scale.
Yeah.
I mean, the human asks for a minor plumbing repair and receives an extreme structural makeover that they never actually signed up for.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, though, this raises the ultimate demand for proof from the outside world.
A classic skeptic question.
Right. If God is supposedly in the business of building these glorious spiritual palaces, why do the construction sites look like such disasters? Why do so many Christians seem like rundown, toxic shacks compared to non-Christians who seem perfectly fine?
And Lewis addresses this argument head-on. He frames it as a highly logical question. He uses the Colgate toothpaste analogy.
Oh, right.
If a company claims Colgate is the ultimate toothpaste, you would naturally expect anyone using it to have better teeth than anyone who doesn't.
Makes total sense.
He also compares it to evaluating two industrial factories, Factory A and Factory B.
And the text gives us two very specific hypothetical characters to illustrate this. Miss Bates and Dick Firkin.
Yes.
Miss Bates is a Christian, but she has a venomous tongue. She is generally miserable to be around.
Not someone you want to hang out with.
No. Dick Firkin, on the other hand, has zero interest in religion, but he is naturally kind, easygoing, generous, and just a fantastic guy.
Everyone loves Dick.
Right. So the world looks at that and says, if Christianity works, why is Miss Bates so awful and Dick so great?
Well, Lewis argues that this conclusion comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of how to judge transformation.
Okay, how so?
The text posits that we cannot judge the management, meaning God, solely by the final output without looking at the machinery.
And the machinery is human temperament.
Exactly. If you walk into Factory A, which has ancient, rusted, broken-down machinery, and the management somehow manages to produce anything of value at all, it is a miracle of good leadership.
Right, because they were working with scrap.
Exactly. Factory B might have brand new, state-of-the-art machinery, so even with completely mediocre management, it naturally produces a high volume of goods.
It's like comparing computers. Dick Firkin is running on a brand new, top-of-the-line laptop. Miss Bates is running on a 15-year-old machine with a cracked screen and a fried motherboard.
Perfect analogy.
You can't blame the software engineer for the fact that the 15-year-old laptop struggles to open a web browser.
That is exactly Lewis's point. He argues that natural niceness is often just the result of good digestion, a stable upbringing, and healthy biological nerves.
So it's biological luck.
In his view, those are natural gifts given through biology and environment. They are not spiritual achievements.
Miss Bates, on the other hand, might be dealing with terrible genetics, a traumatic background, or a naturally anxious disposition, the broken machinery.
Right. The text insists that the true test isn't whether Dick is currently nicer than Miss Bates.
What is it then?
The real question is, what would Dick be like if he surrendered his stellar machinery to God? And what would Miss Bates be like if she didn't have any spiritual management at all?
Wait, I really need to pause here and ask for some clarification.
Sure.
Does that mean being a good, nice person doesn't actually matter to God? Because telling people that being nice doesn't matter sounds like a recipe for societal chaos.
No. Lewis isn't saying it doesn't matter. He is saying that God's goal goes far beyond mere niceness. And in fact, natural niceness can become a psychological trap.
A trap.
Yeah. The text introduces a fascinating paradigm of the rich versus the poor, and it has absolutely nothing to do with money.
Okay, what does it mean here?
In this context, natural niceness, good mental health, and charm are a dangerous kind of wealth.
Dangerous.
If you are naturally brave, smart, and everyone likes you, You might sail through your entire life never realizing you need any help whatsoever.
Oh, I see.
You view your goodness as your own personal property. You become entirely self-reliant and self-satisfied.
You never hit rock bottom, so you never feel the need to look up?
Precisely the danger Lewis is warning about. But the poor, the people who are psychologically broken, neurotic, timid, or prone to intense, destructive passions?
Like Miss Bates.
Exactly. They learn very quickly that they're totally lost without outside intervention. When they try to be good on their own strength, they fail visibly and miserably.
And that failure shatters their self-reliance.
Lewis argues that mere moral improvement isn't the end game. Absolute redemption is. And redemption requires a surrender of the will, which the rich Dick Firkins of the world are often far too comfortable to offer.
There is an analogy he uses to summarize this that I absolutely love.
Which one?
Lewis writes that God doesn't just want to teach a horse how to jump a little bit higher. He actually wants to turn the horse into a winged creature.
Oh, the Pegasus analogy?
Yeah, and when those wings are just starting to grow, they don't look majestic. They look like awkward, ugly lumps on the horse's back.
Like tumors, almost.
Right. During that transitional phase, the horse might actually look worse and jump much more clumsily than a normal, natural horse. But you have to endure the awkward, ugly lumps to eventually get the wings.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Lewis makes it clear that this isn't just a poetic metaphor.
He means it literally.
He literally frames this transformation as the next step in human evolution.
Wow.
Popular imagination usually thinks the next step in human evolution is just us, but with larger brains or, better technology. We assume it's just an upgrade to the BIOS.
Right.
But Lewis argues the next step is a sharp turn in a completely unprecedented direction. It is biological creatures stepping entirely out of the biological realm to become what he calls sons of God.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because Lewis points out that this specific evolutionary step breaks all the old rules of biology we've come to expect.
It really does.
First, it doesn't happen through sexual reproduction. It's not passed down through DNA. Second, it spreads via what Lewis calls a good infection. You catch this new life through direct spiritual contact with Christ and with other humans who already have it.
Like catching a really good cold.
Exactly. Third, it operates on a totally different timeline. We think of Christianity as ancient, but 2,000 years is an absolute blink of an eye in cosmic evolutionary time.
We aren't late-stage humanity. We are still the early adopters. Lewis stresses that we are still the primitive Christians.
Just getting started.
The biological leap from single-cell organisms to mammals took millions of years. This spiritual leap is happening at lightning speed by comparison.
And the most critical difference of all this next evolutionary step is entirely voluntary.
Yes, you have a choice.
In past evolutionary leaps, the organism didn't get a vote. But Lewis argues that humanity can actively choose to stay in the biological womb of nature.
Even though the text bluntly warns that choosing to stay in the biological womb ultimately means we will decay and die.
Right. The choice is ours. But I've got a major concern with this good infection idea, and I think a lot of listeners will share it.
Lay on me.
If we all give up our natural desires, our unique quirks, and let this one divine will completely replace our own,
Yeah.
won't we just become a monotonous army of identical clones? If Christ is in all of us, won't we all just think and act exactly the same, like the Borg from Star Trek?
It is a highly logical fear, honestly. Like the fear of losing your individuality. But the text dispels this using two brilliant analogies.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is salt. If you hand a salt shaker to someone who has never tasted salt in their life, and they taste a pure grain of it, they might say, wow, this is incredibly strong and overpowering.
It is a strong flavor.
Right, so they think, if I put this on all my food, everything will just taste like salt. It will ruin the uniqueness of the meal.
But we know from experience that salt actually does the exact opposite.
Yes. Salt doesn't make eggs and cabbage taste the same. It actually brings out their true, distinct flavors. It makes eggs taste more like eggs and cabbage taste more authentically like cabbage.
That is the mechanism Lewis is describing. Christ is the salt. The divine life doesn't overwrite the individual, it enhances them.
Precisely. And the second analogy is light.
Okay.
If a group of highly diverse people are standing in a pitch black room and you say, I'm going to turn on a uniform light that will hit all of you equally, They might worry that the uniform light will wash out their individuality and make them all look identical.
Wash them all out.
But in reality, the light is the very thing that makes their unique differences visible in the first place.
That is profound. The light doesn't blind you to the differences, it reveals them.
And here is the key psychological insight that Lewis drives home to close out this idea. We fiercely protect our natural self because we are convinced it is so original and unique to us.
Oh, we love being unique.
But Lewis asks us to really examine that. Is it original? Our natural self is mostly just a collection of biological heredities we didn't choose, psychological urges we can't control, and ideas implanted in us by our environment.
Like advertising.
Exactly. Today, we could add that our unique desires are heavily shaped by algorithms and targeted advertising. We think we are being fiercely independent, but we are often just reacting to stimuli.
So we aren't as original as we think.
Not at all. The text argues that you only get a true original personality when you completely surrender to the creator who actually invented the specific character you are meant to be.
Wow. You essentially can't find yourself until you are willing to lose yourself.
That's the core of it.
Okay, let's tie all of this together for you listening right now. This deep dive into mere Christianity isn't just high-minded philosophy meant to be debated in a university classroom.
Not at all.
Lewis is describing the literal battle you face the exact moment you wake up every single morning. Before your feet even hit the floor, your natural desires, your anxieties, your career ambitions, and your to-do lists.
They just rush at you.
They rush at you like wild animals demanding your attention.
The BIOS is incredibly loud and demanding.
And in that moment, the choice is yours. You can spend your entire life just trying to manage the animals, holding on to a nice, decent, natural life where you pay your moral taxes and keep the rest of your energy for yourself.
The comfortable cottage.
Right. Or you can hand over the keys to the property entirely. You can let the comfortable cottage be demolished so that you can be rebuilt into a sprawling palace where the creator of the universe actually resides.
It's a huge choice.
It really is. And we're going to be diving even deeper into these concepts, so I want to inform you that there's more to come. We will have a new deep dive continuing our exploration of this very same book, Mere Christianity, by C.S. Lewis, very soon.
Looking forward to it.
Me too. May God bless all of you.
And as you go, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. What if the parts of your personality that you are guarding most fiercely right now, the flaws, the pride, and the quirks you so proudly call yourself, are the exact things preventing you from discovering who you are actually created to be?